Hello class. Let's take a look at reading data from a file and then writing data back out to a file. So we're going to take a look at file input and file output. I have started up our testing IDE again, so we'll be able to use that. And just taking a quick look at the file input section in ZyBooks, it will give us a lot of good information about how to set up a file input stream and how to connect to it and read from it. I'm going to give us a more abbreviated version of it that we can use in our programs, and essentially it does the same thing, but it gives you a better working copy, I think. So let's start out with, first of all, we need to create a file to read from. So let's create a new file, and we'll call it inputfile.txt. And we'll click over here and open it up, and we'll type in some values. Let's use a string, an age, and GPA, since that's what we've been using all along anyway. And we'll make up some other values, 2.2, Alice, 15, 3.8, Mike, 18, 2.7. I think that's good for now. So we have 4 rows of data. I've put tabs in here, so there's tabs separated, so there's tabs between each value. And we have a string, we have an integer, and we have a double or a float. So the idea is we want to be able to read each line of these files, and in turn each field in the row, right? Each column. We want to be able to read John as a separate thing, the age as a separate thing, and the GPA as a separate thing. So let's minimize this back because we don't need it, and we'll take a look at our program. So the first thing we want to do, and it says it here in the book, reading from a file, we need to create what they call a file input stream. Now, we've been using input streams all along. We've been calling it sys.in or system.in. So whenever we were reading from the keyboard, that's a specialized file input stream. It's, well, not really a file input stream, but it's an input stream that's coming from the keyboard. So we already have one, we've already been using it. So now we're just going to use what we know and extend it a little further to, instead of looking at keyboards and screens, we're going to look at files. So we need to import some classes, first of all. First, we need to import the file input stream, and that comes from import java.io.fileinputstream. Import the file input stream. Class. Okay, so we have our class. We also need to now, I'm going to kind of do it out of order here because I want to show you what happens when we do it this particular way. We need to create our file object. So remember how we used the scanner to create the new scanner to connect to system in? Well, we're going to do something similar here. We're going to do file input stream, because that's the name of our class, and we'll call it input file. That's the file we want to read from, the one we just created, equals new file input stream. So far it looks very similar to the scanner, doesn't it? But now we're going to give it a file name, inputfile.txt. So now we have our file input all set up and configured. So I'm going to put commented here, open a file for reading. Okay, so put a little bit of code in, let's try it and see what happens. And as expected, I have an error. And the error says, unreported exception, file not found, must be caught or declared to be thrown. So that's a whole lot of text that means not a whole lot to us right now. What is essentially happening is we are doing something that is considered risky. We're doing file input. So why does that mean it's risky? Well, what if the file doesn't exist? Or what if we don't have permission to read that file? Or what if there's a disk error? Or what if the network fails? All these could cause this statement here to fail. And we need to be able to handle that error. Now, unfortunately, error handling is not in the scope of CST 141. It is in CST 242. And maybe we'll touch on it a little later in a separate video, just as an aside. But for now, you need to know that we need to put in this statement. We're going to finally modify this public static void main a little bit. Throws IO exception. And before we can even do that, we need to import another class. We need to import java.io.io exception. So this gives us all the exceptions that we could get when we're trying to access the file. Now, what this is saying, I gotta spell that right. What this is saying is that you're telling the compiler, yes, I know this may have a problem, and this may cause a problem, but I'm going to send the responsibility of handling this error to whoever called this method. In this case, it's the main method, so it's going to be the Java virtual machine that's calling the method. But if this was a different method, it would be the responsibility of whoever called that method to handle the IO exception. Again, not in the scope of this class, just know that you need to include this. And I will include all this when I post the code for the sample code when we're done. So, we have our IO exception, we have our input stream. I spelled this wrong. Oh, it looked funny. EXEPT. Okay. If I run it now, missing a semicolon. Where am I missing that semicolon? Not throws, plural. I am really having a tough time with the spelling today. There we go. Produce no output. Well, that's true, because we opened the file and we didn't do anything after that. So all we did is open a file for reading, we made the connection, and then the program ended. So next thing we want to do is use a tool that we already know about to be able to read from that file. Now, what do we know we can use to scan and read a file? Well, we know we have the scanner. So we can do scanner in FS instead of SCNR. We'll put in FS for input file system equals new scanner. Now, instead of system.in, which we've been using all along, we're going to use input file. So we're connecting our scanner here to our input file instead of connecting it to the keyboard like we had done in the past. So we're changing how our scanner works. We're scanning the input file this time. To read. So now I have my scanner connected, and I can now go in and start reading from that file. I can do infs dot, well, let's just do a simple one, system.out.println infs.next. So instead of doing scanner.next, we do infs.next. And if I run this, I get John. So John was the first token that we received, the first name. So this proves that I have made the connection to the file and I am able to read it. Well, ideally, you'd want to read the entire line of data at one time. So we're going to, instead of doing next, we're going to do next line. We want to read an entire line from the file at a time so we can process it. And the reason why we want to process it as an entire line is, if you see it's a data file, all the data is lined up in a specific way. And we want that to be, that we want to be able to use that to our advantage when we try to parse the individual pieces of data out of each row. So if I run it this time, now I should get the whole row of data, which I do. Now, I could do this for as many lines as there are in the file, but honestly, I don't know how many lines there are going to be in this file. Right now, I know there's 4, but there could be more or less at a later time. So if I run that 5th one, you see the 5th one, no line found, we got an error. We did read the 4 prior, but we got an error on this 5th line. So instead of doing this, it'd be far better to use, well, a loop. So let's use a loop. And what kind of loop do we want to use when we want to read an unknown number of things? Well, that's the while loop. And what do we want to check? NFS is the file stream that we've connected to. That's our scanner. We only want to continue and when there is a next line. Well, we've been looking at all the time, let's see if I can find it in the book here for us. Getting the next line, or just blindly reading a piece of information from the file. We want to be able to be smarter about it and read from the file if the next line exists. And you see here, this is similar. I'll use this as an example. A programmer can read varying amounts of data by using a loop, which we're doing. The hasNextInt method returns true if an integer is available for reading. All right, so this is for hasNextInt. Well, we don't want hasNextInt. We want hasNextLine. So we want to see all the methods that the scanner has. So when you look that up, you'll notice that there is another one called hasNextLine. So we'll put in nfs.hasNextLine. So if it has a next line, we'll read it and print it. So now this should print out every line of the file. And it did. No errors this time, because when this became false, the loop ended. Okay, so we were able to read from a file. We were able to get our data into our program. Let's now take a look at the opposite side of it. Let's take a look at writing to a file. And we're not going to get super fancy here. What we're going to do is just take the input file and write it to the output file. As is, no changes. And we'll see how that looks. So if we go into our book, into the next section, it talks about a print writer and system.out and file output stream. Now, it has this great table for writing to a file. It does not have a great table for the input file, unfortunately. But we're going to use this. We're going to use this file output stream. We're going to use the print writer. Now, the print writer is the kind of like the opposite of the scanner, where the scanner reads from the file stream. The print writer writes to the file stream. So it's kind of like the opposite. So we're going to use the print writer. That being said, we need to create 2 more imports. And what do you think they are? java.io.file output stream and import java.io.printWriter. Now, we're being very specific about what java.io.classes we want to pull in. If we wanted to, we could just bring in all of them, all the java.io classes. And you can certainly do that. It is unnecessary because it'll make your program much bigger, and it may open you up to vulnerabilities in other packages and classes that you weren't planning on using. So while you can do this, probably not a great idea. Maybe for testing it is, but in a live production program, probably not a great idea. Anyway, so we have our output stream and we have our print writer. So let's put some comments in here. Read from input file. Read So what we want to do now is we want to be able to create the output file. So we can do that. I'm just going to kind of organize this up a little bit. Open a file for writing. And, well, I could probably just copy it from the book this time because it's right here. I'll change some of the stuff in it because I don't want to use exactly the same. File output stream, output file equals new file output stream, and I'm going to call it output file.text. Already have a .text. And now I'm going to connect the print writer. And that's going to be just print writer, and same as the scanner kind of syntax. Out fs equals new print writer output file. So you can see the print writer is very similar to the scanner in terms of syntax. There we go, fix that up. So we want to write, we use print writer, we want to read, we use scanner. Now, we just need to be able to do the print statement. So normally we would do something like system.out.println, and we would print, well, like we just did, the file line. Well, let's make it a little smarter. Line of text equals in fs dot next line. Let's store it into a variable. And we'll have to declare that variable. Let's go back up top. String, what do I call it? Line of text equals. So we create our variable, initialize it to nothing. Read it from the file. We're going to print it to the screen. That's the system.out.println. Now, how do we print it to the print writer? Through the print writer to the out fs? Well, instead of using system.out, we're going to replace that with, what do you think? Out fs. Out fs.println. And the print line is the same as we've seen before. You can use print, print line, print def. All the same things work. Now, when I run this, it's going to read a line of text, print it to our screen, or write it to a file. The file is output file.text, which currently doesn't exist, and that may give us a little hiccup here. We're going to find out in a second. I don't know if it's going to create a file for us or if I have to create a blank file first. So we're going to find that out right now. And let's give it a try. Oh, it does not like that. Java.io.printer writer, so I spelled that wrong, so I gotta go fix that. Print writer. Oh man, I cannot type today. Print writer. Try it again, fix the errors. Great. Output to the file, to the screen. So we have our output. Did it output to a file? Well, we have 3 now. And there's our output file. Is it in there? Oh, there's nothing in there. What happened? Well, there's something more we have to do. We need to be able to close the output file for writing, and we haven't done that. So, outfs.close. And you can see that is listed right over here. Close the file after writing all desired data. And the reason why we need that is because we don't write directly to the file. What happens is when we write it to a buffer in memory. When that buffer is told to purge or empty, it'll write it out to the file onto the disk. Disk operations are slow compared to memory operations. So you want to limit the number of memory to disk operations when you can. So we do all our writing to an output buffer in memory, and when the time comes to close it out, we close it out. So let's give it a run. Check our file. There's our data. So, very important, you need to have that out fs.close. Honestly, you should also have infs.close as well. Whenever you're done using a resource, in this case the input file, you should release it so somebody else could use it if they need it. If there's another program or a program running that needs it. This way you don't get any locking situations where somebody's got a file that's open and nobody else can get to it because you're reading from it. So, very basic example, how you read from a file, read to a file. You can manipulate the file in here if you want, and we could try a simple example. Let's convert all these names to uppercase. So why don't we do line of text? Well, why don't we just do it in the print statement? Dot to uppercase. We'll print all the names in uppercase now. Now if we run it, you see that the output on the screen hasn't changed, but the output in the file has changed. So we have all the names now in uppercase. Okay, so let's have a quick look through the textbook and see if there's anything else we want to take a look at for this particular example. All right, so here's an example that says you could write, instead of text to a file, you can write HTML. So you can use Java to write HTML pages to be served up by a server to web browsers. So you can do that as well. And that's okay, that's about it. I'm going to stop this recording now. I'm going to continue with this piece of code. I want to show how we can parse the data on the inside. So that'll be in the next video. But I want to pause this one now. Remember that you need all these items in order to read from and write to a file. And feel free to use these as a template for your labs. It'll be a good starting point. Here's how you open the file. Here's how you set up a file for reading, and then here's how you set up a file for writing. Here's how you go through and read each line of the file. And here is where you would do whatever manipulation you wanted to do with the data on a line-by-line basis. And I'm going to show you how we can do that in the next video. Okay, that's it for now. I'll see you in the next one.